Our first speaker tonight, this morning, and all sort of shaped with this in mind of being purposeful and thoughtful and honest. Our first speaker is a dear friend and admired colleague, John Dichtl. So John, if you want to come on up, I'll give a brief introduction before you start. John is the president and CEO of the American Association for State and Local History, and he is a deeply respected and trusted leader in our field. John became the ASLH president and CEO in 2015. Prior to that, he was the executive director of the National Council on Public History for 9 years, and then worked for the Organization of American Historians for 14 years as deputy director and in several other roles. John received his MA and PhD in early American history from Indiana University, and from 2006 to 2015, he was an adjunct faculty member of the history department at Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. John helped found the History Relevance Campaign, the International Federation for Public History, and is active in the National Coalition for History. And I would also say some of the best work that AASLH is doing is the work that they're doing right now, and that's under your leadership. So thank you for sharing your insights this morning. Welcome, John Dichtl.
Thank you, Jamie. And you know, when a speaker brings his own water up here, you know he's going to be up here for a long time. Now, hopefully it won't be that long. I'm super excited to be here. I was in Williamsburg exactly a year ago on spring break with my family, bringing my two preteen kids here, and we had an incredible time, but it was never quite this sunny, so I'm excited to be here on such a beautiful day, and I think it's propitious of what we're trying to do here. As Jamie said, Cliff and Carly last night were incredibly inspirational. I think they had us at 90 or 100,000 feet, and I think my job is to bring us down just a little bit and talk a little bit more about some opportunities and practicalities and some framing. But I think you'll hear in what I'm going to say a lot of echoing of points that they made and that Jamie has made. So thank you all for being here. You know, it's coming. I'd like to say, hey, we're here. It kind of feels like last night I felt like, hey, we're finally here, but we're still at the beginning of a long journey. And you know, as well as I do, it will be here very shortly. I tried to calculate this. I'm not very good at it, but I think it's about 172 weeks, something like that. July 4th, 2026 will be here. And what I want to do today is explore with you the need for our history organizations to articulate a bold vision. You know, some of the themes that we heard yesterday, you know, there's a lot of common ground here, and to think about how we can make this a really once-in-a-generation event. It is a once-in-a-generation event. How many people in this room, well, you all look pretty old, with the lights in my eyes. You all look as old as I am. How many people would say you were old enough to experience the bicentennial? Yeah, see, that's unusual. Okay, that's great. Great, I did too. I'm usually in groups where it's just a few people, so fantastic. So I think we have two incredible opportunities here. First, as Jamie said and Carly and Cliff said, we have an opportunity to promote a really inclusive anniversary, something that's open and honest and unifying of the country. And we sorely need that as a country. And then second, kind of an ulterior motive or something I hope all of you would agree with, we need to use this opportunity to make our history organization stronger, because these opportunities only come once every 50 years, and we have to do more than just get through 2026. We want to set ourselves up to have strong historical societies, history museums, historic sites for the next several decades. So that'll be sort of a second theme in here. So we should be sharing with Americans of all backgrounds and beliefs the entire sweep of our shared heritage, and think about the reason we're doing that is so that we can continue to make progress together as a people, as a country, towards justice. And then second is that theme of strengthening history organizations, strengthening the field, investing in it, getting other people to invest in it, so that we can really maximize this semi-quincentennial moment. So before offering, make sure my slides are up there. So before offering some ideas about how to get to that vision, I'd like to provide an overview of what's happening across the country. So as probably all of you know, formal efforts to organize and get ready for the 250th started in 2016. You could go back before that, but in 2016, the U.S. Semiquincentennial Commission was formed, and shortly after that, it formed the America 250 Foundation, which is its nonprofit arm. And I'll kind of refer to them collectively as sort of the same thing. But the commission is made up of 8 members of Congress, 16 private citizens, and then ex officio heads of major federal agencies. And so there's the America 250 Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm. It has the staff to carry out the vision of the commission. And in the past couple of years, the commission and the foundation have received about $8 million in funding from the federal government. And then in this current budget, that was bumped up to $15 million. So America 250 has been in touch with many of you, many of the state commissions, probably here in Virginia. You've probably really felt the touch of America 250, the commission and the foundation. You're close to their headquarters in Washington. And we know that the commission has been really reaching out across the country, holding listening sessions over the last few years, really trying to connect to organizations and to the states. America 250 Foundation is also planning some national signature programs. The one that I know about, and I'm not sure if there are others yet, but the one that I know is going to be in Philadelphia next year in 2024 at Carpenter's Hall. It'll be a Young People's Continental Congress, bringing student delegates from across the country, and they're working with National History Day to do that. And from what I gather, America 250 will be organizing other national events like this, or partnering with organizations to create national events like this. Both the commission and the foundation have recently undergone leadership changes, so they're in a somewhat of a moment of pause right now that some of you may have noticed, some of you may have not noticed. So we're still waiting to hear from Rosie Rios, the chair of the commission, what the final direction is. We do know that from its very beginning in 2016, the commission and then the foundation have had this vision that the entire commemoration should be very grassroots, that the direction and leadership from the federal government should be relatively light, and that it's up to the states and to the localities to plan their own commemorations. So we know they've reached out to tribal organizations, they've reached out to all the states and all the territories during those listening sessions, and they're hoping that every state will form a commission. And right now, this is the state of the commissions. Hopefully, this is accurate. If anyone sees, if your state has a commission and it's not green, please let me know. I'll put it on the map for next time. But the green states are the 30 or so state commissions. The yellow are states where there's action pending that we know about. I think by July 4th of this year, there will be a sense of panic across the country for the states that haven't filled in, and we'll see, next year, the map will be complete. That's my prediction. So, as you look at this map and think about all the state commissions, and you think about who's here today and who's not, that helps kind of underscore the idea that this commemoration has to be for everyone. It has to be for people in every state. It's not just a Virginia thing. It's not just the original 13 colonies. It has to be for every state. And I think the single most common kind of question that I've either heard or seen on people's faces over the past several years as we've talked about the semi-quincentennial is people from states that are not near the original 13 or who did not have sort of direct connections to the American Revolution, people from those states trying to imagine how they were going to commemorate this. And so I think there are lots of easy answers to that. But it's easy answers in that you don't just have to connect to the time. You don't just have to connect to 1776 or the founding era or the revolution. It's the ideas that came out of that, as Jamie said, and lots of other ways to connect to the 250th. So, we really want to fill in this map so that this is a commemoration for everyone. So for ASLH, what we've come up with as our vision for the 250th, which I think it fully supports everything that was said last night, I think and hope it will echo things that you hear through the rest of this weekend. Our vision is to help American society move towards or progress towards justice through an inclusive approach to history and to strengthen the history field by attracting interest and investment. So this will mean sharing a complete story of our past, one that encourages critical thinking and asks us to consider how lessons of the past can help us continue to pursue liberty and justice for all. And we're arguing that we have to seize this moment to think about the long-term health of the history field. The 250th offers a rare opportunity to invest in the institutions and the people that make up the nation's historical infrastructure and cultural infrastructure. And we have to ensure that our stories, our objects, our landscapes, our buildings, and our documents are all well preserved for generations to come. So the lead up to 2026 is a chance to prioritize history and civics and funding for these in museums, libraries, in education, so that the impact of the Semiquincentennial is felt long after 2026. This is not just about a celebration or a commemoration culminating in 2026. I'm already hearing lots of my peers and colleagues talking about, well, 2026 is really the beginning of the sort of the constitutional era, and the anniversary of the Constitution really will be the finishing point. So we're really just, it's not even 2026, that's just the beginning. And that's pretty exciting to think about. I hope that's true. But it's a long road ahead of us. So what can the history community do to make this vision a reality? So this brings me to what ASLH has been doing for the last several years. So first of all, for those of you who don't know, AASLH, the American Association for State and Local History, was founded about 85 years ago in 1940, 83 years ago. It is a national professional association for people who work at historic sites and history museums and historical societies all over the country of all different sizes. And we provide crucial resources, professional development, all kinds of guidance, leadership, convene lots of groups, have lots of committees, do a conference, have publications, everything a professional society does for people in this field. And since 2016, ASLH has been pretty fixated on 2026 and have been trying to organize convenings, get people thinking. We had to deal with some apathy because of, that we had just gone through the 100th anniversary of World War I, 100th anniversary of women's rights. But now I think we're really in a place where, it's all coming together. We're getting so close. So there are several things that ASLH has done. As I said, we convened groups, particularly pretty early on, we formed a coordinating committee, sort of a committee of correspondence, I think, of people from federal agencies, people from national associations in the museum and history fields, some larger state organizations, some national organizations, and that coordinating committee still meets today. We meet every quarter, and we share what's going on, very much like what we're doing here this weekend, planning, things coming up, trying to inspire each other for the 250th. We also last year started convening state commissions. So some of you in the room who are on state commissions at our conference and by Zoom meetings, we are trying to provide a forum so state commissions can talk to each other. But we also know that not everyone is already convinced about the Semiquincentennial. We know that there are younger members of the profession, younger members of the public, who are not quite convinced that this is such a big thing or have some degree of skepticism about the need to commemorate or even some of the themes and values that I think we heard last night and that you'll hear more of this weekend. So one of the things we're doing is we're organizing a virtual summit April 27th and 28th that will really get at that question of why commemoration? Why does commemoration of any kind matter? How have other commemorations of other things in the past, what have they meant? What are the ethics of it? What's the history of it? What are the practices? And then also looking deeply at the question, why this commemoration? Why does the Semiquincentennial matter? Other things that ASLH is doing, so in your tote bag yesterday, there was a kind of this maroon colored, let me find it here, booklet that we did, the field guide, Making History at 250 field guide. We got an NEH grant a couple of years ago, put together a fantastic panel of scholars and public historians from museums and historic sites, and they generated these themes. So these are very much based in current scholarship. And the idea is that, when we started this theme project, we didn't know what the different states would come up with. We thought also that America 250 Foundation would come up with sort of national historical themes, or that the Park Service would, or the Smithsonian would, or someone. We didn't really expect that this would be the only try at it. So we did it early. That's what the guide is. I want to spend a little bit of time diving into it, but it continues to be kind of the only national thing out there. And I think there are a lot of states that have their own themes. I know New Jersey has its themes, North Carolina has great themes, and there's a lot of commonality between them. So I hope you'll see that these 5 themes in this guide are very flexible and connectable to work that you're already thinking about. So the idea is that with these themes, people at state and local history sites of all kinds would have an additional prompt to connect to some kind of cohesive national presentation of what the Semiquincentennial is about. So the first theme is unfinished revolutions, and it's the idea that the fight for liberty, equality, and justice has a very long and complex history through formal politics, grassroots organizing, labor unrest, boycotts, protests, litigation, war, and a wide range of other mass and individual actions that Americans have always been trying to challenge the idea of America and trying to challenge their fellow citizens to live up to its highest ideals. So that unfinished revolution, the idea that the revolution didn't just start and end in the 1770s, but that it continues today through American history. So it asks questions like, beyond the revolution itself, what were other revolutionary moments in American history, and what are the major advancements and setbacks for rights and the fight for equality in this country? The second theme is this power of place. So it gets us thinking about location and land and challenges us to think beyond the political boundaries of what is in the United States right now, of those places in the United States right now. So we consider the full history of those spaces and of people's connection to those places. And it's about a deep engagement with place to get at questions like what was happening in your community during the Revolutionary era, or how did the natural environment from rivers, lakes, swamps, deserts, mountains shape the past events that were important in your state history or in your community's history? How did it shape migration, imperialism, expansion, economic development, business innovation? And then thinking about place is also a way to think about how indigenous peoples' past and present connections to place environments really inform our understanding of historical developments and contemporary challenges. So we the people is a theme that opens questions about how the United States, throughout much of its history, has excluded groups of people, from women to free and enslaved African Americans, indigenous peoples, various groups of immigrants over time, people with disabilities, the poor, and many others. And how have we excluded people from full participation and representation in the nation's political, economic, and cultural life? But also recognizing that over time, the United States has also incorporated more and more people of different backgrounds into society, into government, and that as diverse populations have staked their claim to belonging and press for a more pluralistic and equitable nation, that we get better. We get better as a country as this happens. So it asks questions like, who is considered American, and when are they considered American, and who gets to decide? When and how did different groups of people gain the status of citizenship, and what rights and responsibilities did it include, and how has this played out differently in each of the states at different times? So the American experiment is the idea that leaders of the founding era knew that they did not have all the answers. Their representative democracy and rights-based constitutionalism were transformative, but they knew it was an experiment. They expected future generations to improve upon the republic that they created. And Thomas Jefferson observed 40 years after the Revolution, I am certainly not an advocate for frequent and untried changes in laws and constitutions, but I know also that laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. So in our 250th anniversary, we can reconsider the origins of our government, democratic institutions, the republic itself, broader civic life, and reflect on the ways that we have changed them over time and might change them again. And so this is a theme very much about civics. There's a lot of funding coming for civics. There's a lot of new attention in this country in civics. And if thinking about civics and history together is something that really speaks to you and speaks to your institution, your site, I hope you have heard about this publication from the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Our Common Purpose. So it is Our Common Purpose, Reinventing American Democracy for the 21st Century, is really an action plan for civic and governmental renewal. And it's tied to the Semiquincentennial. Like, this is not only because of the Semiquincentennial, but for lots of other reasons that will be apparent to you. There are things that need to be changed in how we govern ourselves, and this is an opportunity to do it. Our Common Purpose is the product of a bipartisan, very large bipartisan commission of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So I encourage you to look at that. And it connects with that American experiment theme. And then finally, the last theme in our field guide is doing history. And this is a theme that takes a step back from the practice of history. It's kind of a meta theme. It encourages us to encourage our audiences, our visitors, to really participate in the processes of doing history and thinking about history. So the 250th is a challenge to all of us to think about how we interpret evidence and craft narratives about the past and share that thinking with our visitors, share that with the general public. Be very transparent about it, about how we do our work, the standards that we use, the expectations we have of each other in that sort of professional practice. And so it's a lifting of the veil or a lifting of the curtain. So not just having an exhibit label explaining what they're seeing, but maybe in that exhibit label talking about why the curators chose that object or some obstacles they ran into in putting on the exhibit, some question that they wanted to ask that they couldn't answer because they didn't have the artifacts, why they didn't have the artifacts. That kind of transparency is incredibly important and can really inspire people to feel empowered to know and do history. And then it also helps them value the work that all of us do. And if you're thinking about civics a lot at your history organization and you see the 250th as an opportunity to do more civics work, and you know about the Educating for American Democracy project, which was funded by the Department of Education and NEH, I think in 2019, it's a really exciting framework for educators to use inquiry-based learning to teach about civics. So if you know about that document, if you don't know about it, you should go look it up. If you do know about it, I just wanted to assure you that the themes in that document really map nicely onto the themes, the 5 themes from the field guide that we have. So just a word to highlight a few other ASLH resources that we have that are particularly important for the 250th. So first is our STEPS program, Standards and Excellence Program for History Organizations. It's been around for 10 years. We've renovated it recently, and it's a self-paced, self-study system designed for small organizations and mid-sized organizations in particular to help them review and upgrade policies and practices that they have, things that every history organization or cultural organization needs to think about. And the reason I have this up here and I'm talking about it is that now is the perfect time to be getting your house in order. So that's another thing all of us should be doing, is strengthening our history organizations so that we're ready, again, not only for 2026, but that we're stronger after 2026. And getting more historical societies and museums, particularly small organizations, onto solid ground by time of 2026 or shortly after would be a fantastic accomplishment, if nothing else, for the 250th. The other thing I wanted to mention that ASLH has been working on is this Reframing History project. It's a 2-year deep dive research project into trying to understand how Americans think and talk about history and why it matters. And so Reframing History suggests some strategies, and we have a toolkit for how we talk about the work we do, how we talk about history, why it's important. And these strategies were tested and will lead to more effective communication with public audiences about critical thinking and why that's important, also about using detective work as a metaphor that really connects with most people in explaining what it is that historians do and how they do their work and the methods they use. And then Reframing History also emphasizes the need to use very concrete, location-specific examples from the past to build support for a comprehensive, inclusive history. So I want to close by start closing, wander my way towards the closing. Hey, he said he was closing. I'm headed there. By repeating that the 250th is really a chance for Americans of all backgrounds, beliefs, experiences to engage critically with our nation's past. So this is my 6th grade class. I'm in that photo somewhere. No one ever guesses it, where I am. It was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We were not thinking critically about the past. We were very excited about the bicentennial, but we were not critical thinkers, unfortunately. So, to do this, we're going to need really healthy, strong state, local, national history organizations of all kinds. And when I think back to the bicentennial and experiences like this, and to articles and things I've read about the bicentennial, we know that approximately 35–40% of all history organizations that were in the country in the early 1980s were created during the bicentennial era. So 5 years leading up to the bicentennial, 5 or 6 years leading up to the bicentennial, and a few years after. So in that kind of 10-year period around 1976, 35–40% of all the history organizations in the country by 1983, that's when they were created. They were born during the bicentennial. And that's an incredibly huge number. And we know today that there are more than 21,000 history organizations in the country today because of census work that ASLH has done. And we don't necessarily need or want more history organizations. It probably would be a good thing, but that's not what I'm calling for. But we want all of them to be well-funded and strong. And as another thing to think about coming out of the bicentennial and thinking about where we are as a country today, and as you heard last night, I think the phrase that, or the wording that Carly Fiorina used was fractious. As ideologically divided as we are as a country today, we have a lot of extra work to do as history sites and museums. We can help bring people together. History can really bring people together, at least can get them in the door. They may not agree once they get there on the particulars, but that's where it gets really interesting. But people are attracted to history, or a lot of people are attracted to history. And we can bring people across racial and ethnic divides, across cultural divides, and I think across political divides. And as we do that, we will be repairing our civic fabric, which really needs that renovation work. And I think we can also rebuild a respect for evidence, arguing with evidence, and for good faith argumentation and debate. And we can also make history institutions central to people's lives, or more central to people's lives. And at the end of last year, a survey group, or maybe it was the beginning of this year, More in Common released this fantastic report, Diffusing the History Wars, Finding Common Ground in Teaching America's National Story. And it studied polarization in the national conversation over how U.S. history should be taught to future generations. And this report confirms the findings in our Reframing History study that ASLH did, and it also echoes findings in surveys that the American Historical Association did and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences did in the past couple of years. And what all these reports have in common is that there is a great widespread national appetite for inclusive history. So according to this report, More in Common, 86% of Americans, both Republicans and Democrats, agree on fundamental ideas about how our national history, and how it should be taught. So here's the quote from the report. Quote, Americans of all political orientations want their children to learn a history that celebrates our strengths and also examines our failures. Americans overwhelmingly agree that the experiences of minority groups are an important part of that history, and they agree that if students are better informed about America's past, there's a better chance of not repeating past failures, unquote. So that is a vision of inclusion and relevance and of belonging. And the next 3.5 years are, for all of us, a chance to prepare and to think big and think to the future. And I purposely meant to go back to this slide. So you're thinking about people like this. So despite many shortcomings, the bicentennial 50 years ago had a tremendous impact. There was a huge flood of general public interest in the American story, a huge upwelling in interest in family history and genealogy, in historic preservation. People were visiting historic sites, visiting museums. There was a broadening of attention to diverse, inclusive histories, a grassroots appreciation for local history, the creation of those thousands of history organizations I mentioned, and even more history projects were flourishing around the country. And there was the emergence of the public history movement itself, something that named itself public history. It had already been happening in this country and other places for decades, but it named itself public history, found a place in the academy and colleges and universities, and at the present time, there's something like 160 or 170 public history master's programs in the country. And that was all born out of 1976. So think about what will the legacy of the Semiquincentennial be? What will come out of this commemorative period? And what foundations can all of us lay for the future? So I'll get closer to the ending here by urging all of us to work together on seeking and developing some common ground. That kind of common ground that was in that Diffusing the History Wars report. Some common ground where the broadest swath of people can explore a nuanced, complete, and honest history together. We have to build up from our state and local histories a reinvigorated national history of wholeness, one that emphasizes the ongoing struggles, setbacks, and achievements in becoming a more just society, even if it's a past we continue to contest and wrestle over. So for the past several years, Harvard historian Jill Lepore and others have been calling for this new kind of Americanism, a new national narrative, something she calls a clear-eyed reckoning with America's history, its sorrows no less than its glories. So in her book, This America, The Case for the Nation, Lepore further defines this America as, quote, a community of belonging and commitment, held together by the strength of our ideas and by the force of our disagreements. A nation founded on universal ideas will never stop fighting over the meaning of its past and the direction of its future. That doesn't mean the past or future is meaningless or directionless or that anyone can afford to sit out the fight. The nation, as ever, is the fight, unquote. So this is our fight too. This is our common cause, inclusive history, stronger history organizations, a stronger civic sensibility, making history whole and honest, not cutting pieces out or restricting the teaching of uncomfortable parts of the past. This means supporting a civic society that is as curious about the past as we are, that leaves room for disagreement. It's an America in which all of us can feel like we belong. So thank you. Jamie's looking at me. I'm looking at Jamie. I'll take questions. I don't know if anyone. Sure. Or comments. Yes, I will repeat the question. Marvin. No. That was me in the back with the white hair. It was not a wig. I had super, super white blonde hair. Yeah. With the little tricorn hat, which I still have, and my wife wanted me to bring here, but it would look silly because it doesn't fit. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.